Welcome back to another edition of the Educational AD Podcast. We couldn't do these without the incredible support of our sponsors, and we want to start by saying thank you to all of them. First, thanks to our diamond sponsor, Varsity Brands, including BSN, Varsity Spirit, and Herff Jones. Varsity Brands, elevating student experiences in sport, spirit, and achievement. We also want to say thank you to our platinum sponsors, including Ephesus Lighting, innovating a brighter future at every level. Gilman Gear, always a step ahead. Camp Mobile, where leaders communicate better. Hometown Ticketing, simple and easy online ticketing. Vital Signs, bring student achievements to life. And Gipper, sports graphics made incredibly simple. Thanks to all of our great sponsors. Welcome back, everyone, to another edition of the Educational AD Podcast. Our guest today is Dr. Dave Kelly. Dave's a certified athletic administrator. He's a longtime high school athletic director in the state of Ohio, and he's currently an associate professor at the University of Cincinnati, where he is the program coordinator for their online Master in Science for Sport Administration. Dr. Kelly, welcome to the program.
Jake, an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for having me, and just super excited to have the opportunity to share my thoughts and my background and things of that nature with you. So thank you again for this opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. Thanks for visiting with us. You're doing some great things there with the next generation of ADs. Well, as you know, the life of an athletic director these days is very busy, so we're going to jump right into it.
Sure.
We always like to let our listeners have a chance to get to know our guests. So tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school and college, and maybe how your love of sports led to this career in athletics.
Sure, thank you. So I'm originally from upstate New York in a suburb area of Rochester, New York called Pittsford, and attended Pittsford Sutherland High School. Very active in athletics throughout my high school career, primarily in the sport of basketball. Was all county, honorable mention in a lot of other areas, in terms of the state of New York and that sort of thing. So I had a pretty stellar career as a high school basketball player. Had a very great relationship with my coach, who passed recently. But at any rate, growing up in Pittsford, New York was great. Eventually it turned into an opportunity, unfortunately from injury, that sort of shortened my career. But when I was going to St. Bonaventure University, that sort of got me engaged and involved with the coaching aspect of things. And so literally right across the street from St. Bonaventure University is Archbishop Walsh High School. And it was there where I started cutting my teeth as a coach over at Archbishop Walsh. And then as a student athlete, I was recruited by quite a few institutions, including Syracuse University. And so I had a previous relationship with Coach Boeheim, which then translated into, once I graduated from St. Bonaventure, I transitioned to be his graduate assistant coach.
Oh, wow.
As I worked on my master's degree at Syracuse. And so, the mentors, obviously Coach Boeheim was a huge mentor for me, as well as, ironically enough, Jake Krauthamel. Now, Jake was the director of athletics at Syracuse, and as part of my master's program, sort of did one of these deals where you shadow the director of athletics for an entire day. And so what an experience that was, because this was, in the early 1990s, where the Big East was actually starting to really blow up and become
Oh, yeah.
part of the national scene in terms of both basketball and football. And so, in having that conversation with Jake, and just being a sponge and trying to learn as much as I could from his wealth of knowledge. One of the quotes that he told me in our special day, and I'll never forget it to this day. And it's occurred well over 30 years ago. But he said, when you're an athletic director, he says, I can be the reincarnation of Vishnu, but it's not me that's going to get it done. It's surrounding myself with good people. And so I've taken that to heart. And I certainly to this day, even in a different role as an associate professor, but working with my colleagues and the like, yes, I think that's a very important lesson for athletics and athletic directors in particular, is to, more or less surround yourself with good people and making good hiring decisions and that sort of thing. So that's just a little bit about me, Jake.
Oh no, that's always great to hear those stories and how individuals touched your life. Go and take us that next step. So you're a GA at the Division I school. How did that transition into teaching and coaching? At the high school level.
Sure. So ironically enough, again, it's all about relationships. And so as I was working, for Coach Boeheim, one of my tasks and duties, and I can certainly say that, we were on NCAA probation at that time, but I can honestly say, I was that guy that was going out to the individual classrooms and making sure that, the players were in class and that sort of thing. And I can honestly say that during my tenure there, nobody was academically ineligible on my watch. So, so I'm very proud of that. But then ultimately, I met a professor, Dr. Clifford Crooks, who, sort of saw that I was leaning more towards, wanting to learn the administrative side of athletics in addition to the coaching. And he says, well, Dave, have you ever heard of Ohio University in Little Athens, Ohio? And so I had never heard of it. And so lo and behold, towards the end of my master's program, decided on a weekend trip to just sort of get in the car and go down to Athens and just sort of explore. And sure enough, serendipitously, I met my current mentor, who used to be he's retired now, Dr. Andy Kreutzer, but he was the program coordinator then when I was at Ohio U. Um, with the sport administration program there. And so during that weekend visit, we had the conversation, told him I was, Boeheim's grad assistant, yada, yada. He's like, hey, I know the superintendent of schools over at Federal Hocking High School. I'm pretty sure that he's looking for either a JV or an assistant basketball coach. Let me give him a call and set up an appointment. And so lo and behold, Jake, I mean, you wouldn't believe it. It was just incredible that just what serendipitously happened that weekend. I left and went back to upstate New York with the JV and assistant coaching job at Federal Hocking High School. And so that was incredible, and that sort of started my journey with coaching, and then eventually, while I was in classes at Ohio University, I was sitting literally in the seat right next to Jeff Cullum, who was serving as the physical education teacher in the Vinton County school system. He had heard, he said, hey, I'm going to be transitioning. I'm going to be becoming the principal over at one of the elementary schools. My job is going to be open. Why don't I introduce you to our building principal, Dan Murray? And so next thing I know is that, I'm interviewing for the PE job in the Vinton County schools, got that, and became the junior high athletic coordinator, the assistant AD in the Vinton County schools. And so really, there was a lot of things from that transition while I was working on my PhD that serendipitously these things just sort of all came into place. And a lot of it had to do, again, with the relationships that were established that went back as far back as Syracuse.
Oh yeah, it just underscores the importance of networking at any step in your career, and how those relationships not just are valuable in themselves, but can also pay, big dividends in other ways too. Um, let's go and talk a little bit about that transition from teacher coach to middle school AD and then on to AD. What were some of the things that surprised you about the role of athletic administration when you first came on? And maybe what were some of the things that you felt, boy, my background has really prepared me well for this?
Actually, it's interesting that you mentioned that because um, I did a lot of research into the area. Of course, my dissertation, which was funded by Frank Kovaleski of NIAAA fame. I'll get into that here in a moment. But I found out that my physical education background really did not prepare me for the position of athletic director. But by the time I went to my master's and saw the sorts of things that Jake was doing at Syracuse, and then it was a lot of it was self-taught, to be honest with you, in addition to some of the coursework, and that's why I was so engaged in wanting to gain as much information as I possibly could. And then eventually, as I was working within athletics, I took a grant writing class, and I thought, okay, well, then this is obviously something that, is going to be important for us to sustain ourselves in certain instances, to keeping the athletic program going. And so there was a lot of skill sets that I tried to piece together that really helped benefit my transition into that more administrative role. I really didn't have much experience in terms of interviewing coaches for positions. Oftentimes that was already handled by our building principal anyway. So therefore I might have sat in on some of those, but I wasn't necessarily the one that was going to make that final call. And so and then in other instances, more or less my role was to, schedule the games, make sure everybody was on the buses and, safe, that there wasn't, that the transition from bringing outside teams to our facility, sort of serving as that, host, here's your locker rooms, so on and so forth. So, there were a variety of different things that I was responsible for, and that at the end of the day, as I was working and researching and that sort of thing at Ohio, really, I figured out what I wanted to do, and it sort of developed my uh, my dissertation idea, which ended up being, how can high school or even middle school athletic directors, for that matter, how can they become more educationally prepared? Because I mean, and it's no fault through, their own background, because there's been a lot of guys and gals who've gone that traditional route of, they coached a certain number of sports. They might have been the social studies or the PE teacher, but, based on the research that I did, I statistically demonstrated the correlation between, yes, these are the important tasks and duties that athletic directors perform, but then here's where it was in terms of their educational preparation, in terms of addressing those things. There was a significant gap for that. And so it was because of that gap of knowledge of how to, do things like scheduling, how to, relationship building, from, going out and getting grants and corporate sponsorships, and some of the necessary things, because the school board would put out the levy, and then the levy would fail, and then what are one of the first things to get cut? Your budget for your athletic department is the first thing to get cut. So now you're sort of scratching and trying to find ways in which to fund certain sports or activities or what have you. So I know I've gone in a very broad brush way and sort of all over the place here, but at any rate, I think that what I learned on the job, in conjunction with what I learned through my research, sort of developed into where I am today.
No, I appreciate you sharing that. And it'll lead us into our next point. You've attained the highest level of certification through our national organization, the CMAA. Let's go and talk about that process. As a young AD, how'd you first become aware of, the leadership training courses and that journey to CAA and then CMAA? I think it's important for our ADs to hear about that.
Actually, I have not attained that CMAA, but I'm just a CAA at this point, but that's fine. No, it was actually when I first there was a gentleman that I met while I was working on my PhD. He was over at Georgia Southern University, a guy by the name of Dr. David Bucky Wagner. And so it's through our conversations that he introduced me to Lucia Norwood and a lot of NIAAA people. And he said, Dave, if you sort of, play your cards right, this is really an interesting area where you can perhaps partner and blend, sort of like a master's degree level type program with the NIAAA leadership training courses. And then obviously my dissertation addressed the fact that that this should be done online, because I was that person who, after a full day of work and maybe supervising some contests, then would go to, Tuesday, Thursday classes from 6 to 9 p.m., just dog tired, but did it. And so my thought was, how can we then figure out a way in which athletic directors, might not have to physically go to class, but can do it in this sort of platform where they can do it online. And so that sort of was the birth of that marriage, again, based on the research that I did back, I believe it was in 2000, where again, Frank Kovaleski invited me to the National Athletic Directors Conference in San Diego. And it was at that time where I put out my survey to all the athletic directors that were there, and basically was again sort of asking them, through back then you used the bubble pencil, number 2 pencil Scantron bubble sheets, but then at any rate, again goes to how educationally prepared were you to do these particular tasks and duties, and if it were offered, would it be feasible to have your, if you were going to go after a master's, would you do it online? And so the data came back, very positively in that direction. And that's ultimately how Ohio University pulled the trigger on creating the very first master's program for athletic administrators that incorporated the NIAAA courses, was basically based on my dissertation research.
Let's go and jump right into that. I want you to share with our listeners, exactly what the online master's program is, and then, maybe talk about some of the unique programs that your students are doing.
Sure. So we started, officially launched in 2017 at the University of Cincinnati. I have a wonderful group of colleagues that I work with, and we were sort of very ahead of the curve as it relates to online education, because we also have instructional designers, and that's their full-time job. So they come in and they assist us with sort of the building and construction of the courses in terms of how they're laid out, in terms of how they sequentially should flow and that sort of thing, in terms of, the different tools that are available to us, that sort of thing. And so in addition to that, our focus for our masters is through the lens of college and high school athletic administration. And so we have a number of students who work for our own University of Cincinnati athletic department. They might be working in the compliance area, or they might be working in student athlete services, or they might be that equipment and operations person that is looking to advance themselves that way. But then also the partnerships that I've developed over the years with our undergraduate program in putting students into our local schools in Ohio, and especially in the Cincinnati area. There was a report in the Cincinnati Enquirer that in terms of importance, it goes Cincinnati Reds, Cincinnati Bengals, high school sports, and then everything else falls below that. So if you think about UC and Xavier and some of the other college programs that are in our area and other professional teams, high school sports is very active in our area. And I mean, the list of prominent people that have been through and from Cincinnati, the Larkin brothers, Roger Staubach. Even Urban Meyer cut his teeth at St. Xavier High School before becoming who Urban Meyer is. So we have it's just a very fertile area for high school athletics. And so this was like the most perfect area for me to be in. And so again, developed the relationships over the years and have really, again, helped establish and work with the next generation of athletic directors so that they, number one are, I've created a lot of revenue generators. And so, and I even told them this, and I'll tell them, I'll say this till the day I retire. If you can demonstrate, that you're doing the right thing and you understand the components of educational based athletics, but then also that you can generate revenue, they'll find a job for you. And so, and that's certainly what has happened due to the success that we've had, not only among the private Catholic schools in the area, but then also many of the public schools. I've placed quite a few of my students who are now alumni to those various positions and are now serving as high school ADs. And I think between myself and my colleagues, we've done a pretty good job of preparing them for those realities.
No, that's some really good stuff. And I know you've had some real success with some of your interns or students that you placed out there. Go ahead and share those success stories.
Sure. So I would first start off with Brandon Spaeth over at Roger Bacon High School. In fact, Roger Bacon High School, for those of your audience here that doesn't know, back in 2002, I was actually at that game in Columbus, is LeBron James's only loss in the state finals when St. Vincent St. Mary's lost to little tiny Roger Bacon High School. And so that's his only championship loss that he ever sustained, at the high school level. But obviously we see what he's done recently with the Cavs and the Lakers and so on and so forth, and even the Heat for that matter. But great story there. But at any rate, Brandon is an absolute superstar. He's the assistant athletic director there. He's done so many outside of the box type of things. He most recently implemented figuring out how to use his huge video board to basically duplicate what the NBA did in the bubble, and had virtual fans come and watch high school volleyball games. And so I thought that was pretty creative on his end. And then the other thing is, that I really want to share is that, I mean, I'm not the type of professor that really, the purpose of education is to give them those real life examples. And so, I might do the occasional paper here or there, but one of the very significant courses that I teach is what's called Applied Financial Management Strategies in Athletics. And with that, all my online students, I put them into teams of anywhere from 4 to 6 people, and then we partner them with an institution. It could be a college, it could be a high school, more so high schools than anything else. But at any rate, with those, as an AD, they don't necessarily have the time or the financial or even the human resources to go out and write grants. And so this is where my students come into play. And so they've been very successful over at Milford High School. It's still yet to be determined, but they literally took everything cradle to grave in terms of preparing everything that's needed to put into that grant proposal, handed it over to Aaron Zupka, a former student of mine who's the director of athletics at Milford High School, for him to then apply for the NFL grassroots grant through the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, whether he gets the grant or not, I mean, we got our fingers crossed for that, but there have been other instances, the Good Sports Grant that has been successfully obtained with Alex Malou over at Riverview East Academy within the Cincinnati Public Schools, as well as some other grants at other institutions. And now it's very exciting because with the growth of our program, I now have some students that are from the Massachusetts area that we've partnered with a school in Massachusetts, and we're going after, or they're going after, a dual grant that's being funded by both the U.S. Soccer Foundation and Musco Lighting, and they're going to replace, or at least do the process of wanting to replace the lights at one of their historic stadiums up in Massachusetts. And so, to me, I think that's more valuable than anything else, and something that they can put on their resume, something that they can demonstrate to their future or potential employers, that sort of thing. That, I mean, to do a paper, okay, big deal. But hey, I went out and I helped obtain a grant for this high school. Whoa, you know how to write grants? Perfect. I think that speaks volumes to superintendents or diocesan administrators, what have you.
Oh, absolutely. I really can't imagine a more important piece of information that's going to separate you from the other applicants for a given position. That is fantastic. Dave, we've been asking our EDs around the country about COVID, and we've certainly seen a variety of responses. Some states have, shut down sports. Some have moved the seasons around. Here in Florida, we delayed for a month and then more or less started up later. But we've seen within that system a wide range of responses. Some schools in the Miami area are just now getting back on campus. Here it's mid-October. So share with our listeners what's happening right now in Ohio as far as the schools return to school as well as return to play.
Sure. So I mean, it's sort of a mixed bag in terms of their return to school, as well as for those that decided to either participate or not participate in fall sports. And so here in Ohio, I mean, football is very big. And so therefore, there was a little bit of transition with our state association in terms of its leadership. So that sort of created somewhat of a monkey wrench into, athletic directors sort of, in terms of the guidance that they were seeking from the state association. But at the end of the day, the state association basically said, look, everybody's going to make the playoffs. And so if you're going to participate, we're going to have somewhat of a shortened season, but because of that, and right now we're in the midst of the OHSAA, or Ohio High School Athletic Association football playoffs at the moment. But it was really up to, they made it a local decision. It was really up to the schools, whether that be their athletic administrators or their school boards or what have you, to whether or not they wanted to do sports, and that it was limited to, in terms of the monies, that it was, and this actually came from our Governor DeWine, that it was only supposed to be immediate family of student athletes and other essential personnel that would be allowed to go into the contests and so forth. So I know that in some one-off conversations that I've had with my former students who are now directing, they're taking quite a financial hit because they might not open the concession stands, and that they only have a very limited amount of people per the governor's mandate. But at the same time, we have football, so I think that's a good thing. And so, yes, there's sort of some adjustments that have had to been made due to COVID. You've got that person right there at the front, with that temperature taking gun, taking temperatures and, bringing people in, but got to mask up and doing the right things that way, making sure that they're 6 feet apart. I was over at LaSalle High School with one of my former students, and they had the student section, and literally, treating them somewhat like elementary school students, but, hey, you stand here on this red piece of tape,
absolutely.
You stand, and 6 feet away. But, eventually, as, the learning curve occurs, they eventually get it, and, and they're successfully having sports. I have heard maybe minimal amount of COVID infections in high school athletics here in Ohio. And so it's actually because of those mandates by Governor DeWine, as well as some of the other things that they were learning at that time in order to prepare and that sort of thing. I think it's actually, it's turned out better than expected.
It's always interesting to hear the responses from around the country. And again, you bring up the idea of, the smaller crowds, affecting the gait. I don't think a lot of people outside of our profession understand that even at the high school level, football, very often funds other sports, and there are expenses. I told a parent just a few weeks ago, we're about $2,000 in the hole just before kickoff between the officials, the ambulance, and the security and the support things that we have to have for a home event. And so it is really impacting, high school sports. So it's good to hear that at least the kids are playing, and that so far, the COVID counts are down. Well, guys, Dave, this has just been great to hear a little bit about your program and have a chance to visit with you, but we're not done yet. We always like to wrap up with what we call the AD's Toolbox. Now, you're certainly an experienced athletic director, but right now I'm going to task you with sending out a brand new AD on their very first job. But I'm only going to let you put 3 things in their toolbox. What 3 items are going to go in Dr. Kelly's athletic director toolbox?
Well, I think, whether you want to call it important or not, I think it's vitally important, is just engaging with the generation that we're in the information age, so therefore social media, I think, is crucial. And so having those skills, as well as leveraging social media to your benefit in terms of revenue generation, which is my second tool for the tool belt. So, I mean, in some cases they sort of, intertwine with one another, but I think social media, as well as the revenue generation opportunities through social media, are very important. So Brandon over at Roger Bacon's a great example. I have Kyle Sasala over at Bishop Fenwick High School, Alex Malou over at Riverview East Academy, and a variety of others that I could go on and bend your ear about that. But they are that next generation that they grew up with the iPhone, and so they can literally do, within a matter of seconds, send out a tweet or some sort of information that says, well, hey, thank you, Kelsey Chevrolet, for being our sponsor, and and so on, and hey, here's a tweet, and click on this and get a free test drive. Or it might be something that they put out there, and buy one get one free at Skyline Chili, or what have you. And so leveraging that particular platform through social media, and like I said, in conjunction with generating revenue, I think that that's two significant ones in the toolbox. The other thing is that, and I don't know if this is necessarily a tool, is more so than a recommendation, is in terms of the organizational job demands, the athletic director, the idea of being a one man or a one woman band, that's causing a lot of burnout among our profession. And so I would say that is if you can delegate things, delegate them, get those off your plate, because there are so many things that an athletic director is responsible for, and I even talk about this in my courses, because again, remember I told you that our master's courses sort of look at things through the lens of college and high school athletics. Obviously, the higher up you go in college athletics, the more specialized those job functions become. And so therefore, you have a person who specifically their job is compliance and student athlete eligibility. They have a specific job of, study tables and the student athlete services. They're just doing ticketing. They're just doing this. They're just doing, you sort of know where I'm going with this. Whereas the high school athletic director, guess what? They're all of those things. They're wearing all of those hats. And so therefore, I think it behooves superintendents of schools or diocesan administrators at the private level to really start thinking about, do we want to lay all this on a athletic director, or could we potentially look into the feasibility of bringing on an assistant athletic director that can help sort of with the job responsibilities that are all on the athletic director. I think that that's something in terms of delegation. I think that's a third, again, I don't know if that I would necessarily refer to it as a tool, but more of a recommendation.
Oh no, absolutely. That's an ability. That's a skill to be able to, recognize and nurture the talent around you, and then, delegate as appropriate to that individual, those people. And as far as the information that you talked about, you just keep hearing that more and more. If you want to connect with your students, and in many cases now their parents, you need to have that social media awareness and that social media presence. Okay.
Yes.
And it's an area that I grudgingly accepted, let's say a couple of years ago, but it's paid tremendous dividends. So appreciate you sharing that.
Absolutely.
Dr. David Kelly, University of Cincinnati online master's program. If our listeners want to reach out to you, what's the best way to get in touch?
I'll spell it out. Kelley, D as in David, V as in Victory, at uc.edu, or KelleyDV@uc.edu. Email is basically the left side of my brain. So at any rate, shoot me an email. It might be 24 to 48 hours before I get back to you, but I will eventually get back to you for sure.
You can also find Dr. Kelly on Twitter. He's got a great Twitter presence, posts a lot of the stuff that they're doing at University of Cincinnati. Dave, thanks again for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Jake.
To our listeners, thanks as always for tuning in. Come back again next time for another episode of the Educational AD. Remember, the video portion of this interview is available on YouTube under the FIAAA Educational AD channel. Thanks again for listening.